In this video, we're going to be covering our thoracic spine, PAILs, and rails. This is particularly to work on adding in a little bit more extension of the thoracic spine. So we're going to go over the setup as well as the execution for this. Now, a quick recap on what our PAILs and rails are. So the protocol generally will involve a passive stretch that can last anywhere between 60 seconds upwards to 2 minutes. And then we're going to be doing our PAILs and rails contractions. The PAILs is going to be in the progressive angle, the rails is in the regressive angle. So in this, we want to make sure that we're generating a lot of full body contraction and tension. The intensity is based on how hard you can contract. We may put a scale of intensity, an RPE, and that can be used as a guideline in order to understand how much tension and intensity we want to generate for our PAILs and rails contractions. Now, before we go into the setup, I'm just going to show you what the PAILs action would look like and the rails action would look like. So in this case, because we're trying to add in more extension of that T-spine, what we want to do is for PAILs, we're going to go into an active flexion of the spine. So we almost want to feel as if we're trying to create an active crunch motion. So as I flex the spine, you'll see a little bit of rounding of the upper back. And then for the rails contraction, because we're trying to add in more extension, then we're going to be actively trying to extend that T-spine with a lot of intent and control so that we're not just dumping into that low back and overextending the low back itself. So our setup here, what we're going to need is a bench, and then we also need some kind of stick or dowel. We can also do this without it. Basically, the position that my hand will be in, you can just have no stick in hand and instead just squeeze the fists together. That's also fine if we don't have something. So for the setup, I'm going to first start by placing my elbows about shoulder width apart, maybe a slightly bit longer, because I don't want my hands necessarily to come in too close towards each other. And then I'm going to rest my forehead against the bench here. That just acts as a nice stable support. And I want to ensure that my knees are not too far up in front here, in front of the hips. Rather, I want them either underneath or slightly behind. Your feet can be curled in or just relaxed here with the top of the feet flat against the floor. I'm going to make sure that I have a good grip of the dowel. Right now I'm not creating too much tension there. And then from this position I want to find my current active T-spine extension range of motion. So I want to ensure that I'm not over tucked in the lower back or overly extended already. I'm going to create a little bit of tension in my hamstrings and glutes. And then as I allow my elbows to just drive down into the bench, I'm going to focus on that upper mid back, just slightly sinking down towards my chest and towards the floor. I want to make sure, I'm also going to feel a little bit of stretch here through the lats since our elbows are digging into the bench, our shoulders are going into a little bit more flexion. Once I find my current active range of T-spine extension, I'm going to hang out here, focus on just breathing in and out through the nose. Think about a 5-second inhale through the nose, about a 3 to 5 second exhale through the mouth as I hang out within this stretched position. Now, once I've been here for my intended duration, now what I want to do is I'm going to start to generate my full body contraction before starting that first PAILs contraction. So I start by taking a nice deep breath in. As I exhale, I'm going to start to actively engage and tighten up the core. I'm squeezing the glutes. I might curl my toes in here as well. And I'm going to also start to squeeze the dowel or the stick in my hand a little bit harder. And then once I've generated the desired amount of tension, I'm now going to think about driving my elbows down into the bench and then actively trying to flex the spine. Now, you're not going to see an excessive amount of rounding happening. It's more so of an isometric contraction. So I am trying to think about bringing my sternum down towards my hip and my pelvis. I'm thinking about crunching the core or creating a crunch motion. I'm actively flexing the spine. It'll feel like the spine is trying to push up towards the ceiling. And we'll do that for about 10 to 20 seconds, the prescribed amount of time. And then I'm going to switch to my rails. So now for my rails, I'm going to try to lift my elbows up and off towards the ceiling. Of course, they're not going to lift. And then I'm going to actively, slowly, really focus on creating intention of extending that upper mid-back portion. So I don't want to just feel like my lower back is dumping down. That you can see stays relatively still. And I'm just focusing on pulling and actively extending the upper portion of the spine. After the prescribed amount of time for the rails contraction is complete, relax, release the tension, but stay within this new range of motion. You may rest here for upwards of 10 to 30 seconds, and then we would repeat that process for the prescribed number of repetitions of PAILs and rails. So now I would again take another deep breath in, exhale,
start to generate my full body contraction, get up to the desired amount of intensity and tension, drive the elbows down, actively flex the spine, focusing on that upper mid-back, and then switch to my rails, trying to lift the elbows up, fists towards the ceiling, and actively start to extend the spine.
You will perform these for the prescribed number of rounds of PAILs and rails. Keynote is also to make sure that once we've completed that initial passive stretch of 60 seconds to 2 minutes, that does not have to be repeated between rounds of PAILs and rails.